Okay, so today I'm going to go through a quick walkthrough of the Affordable Report Generator repo. So right now I have MySQL Workbench open. I'm going to assume for the purposes of simplicity that you've already installed all of the dependencies and cloned the repo. So I have MySQL Workbench open to the Affordable Reporter dev schema, and this is the testing database, but the production database will have the same schema, it'll just have different data. So we can see a whole bunch of tables here. Most of these are to help load data in from the main affordable database. So the four that we're going to be interested in are organization, receipt lookup, grant lookup, and grant disbursement. So if you go ahead and click on this little table with a lightning bolt, it'll pull up all of the data in the organization table. So all of this is just pretty standard. An ID number, name, address, email, phone, and the email of the organization owner. And the one thing to note is that any email in this table or in the receipt lookup table could have an email sent to it. So do not put any fake addresses in here. Make sure any address you put in here is an actual email address, because if you put a fake address in here and the system tries to send an email to it, that could cause problems. So the two email addresses in this organization table determine where the monthly batch job sends emails. We'll get to that in a moment. So for the time being, when I do the demo in just a few minutes here, I'm going to want all of the emails to come to me. So I'll go ahead and set all of those just so we don't disrupt anyone else. And then I'm going to click Apply, Apply, Finish. So that's our organization table. This is the grant lookup table. Again, pretty simple. An ID, the name, the current balance in that grant's account, and the owning organization. So then if we go to receipt lookup, this is what the microservice will primarily operate off of. The microservice generates receipts for donations made by users. So we've got an ID number, the amount, the date, the donor's name, the grant that was donated to, and the donor email. Again, don't put any fake emails in here. It will cause problems if you try to send something there. And then the grant disbursement table, this shows basically withdrawals from the grant. So we've got an ID, the grant that was withdrawn from, the amount, date, and the recipient. And since there's no emails in here, you're okay to put fake names in here. So moving on, first we'll look at the microservice. So what this does, this is going to run as a serverless microservice in AWS Lambda. So let me go down here. So this will get passed in an event that contains the donation ID in the database. So like here to send, let me go back to the receipt lookup table. So if I wanted to send something to me, I would put in the donation ID 1, I would go ahead and pass that into the event of the microservice, and it would handle that for me. So we're just going to do some input validation here, open the connection to the database, and to make sure we get all the information we need, we have to join a couple tables. Assuming that all works fine, we'll close the connection to the database, because that way we don't keep the database tied up for longer than we need. And then we'll go ahead and process that, make sure it returned exactly one result. If not, that's an error. And then we're going to render the receipt as a PDF from this template.ejs file, render that as a PDF, upload it to a cloud storage bucket, and email it to the address that we pulled from that receipt lookup table. So now I'm going to open up a bash shell and just quickly demonstrate that for you. So let me change directory into our repo. And then there's a shell script that handles this. So you're just going to call bash build and test locally .sh and then put the donation ID you want. In our case, that's going to be 1. And then it'll build this application inside a Docker container. That'll take a couple minutes. So while we wait on this to run, basically what's happening here is it's building it, basically a miniature Linux OS inside a container on my local machine, so that I can run this without having to directly interact with any of the client's cloud resources. That helps keep the client's bill down. So you'll want to just do all of your testing locally, and then once you're sure that the system works the way you're intending it to, then you'll go ahead and push it up to the cloud. So we can see it's still working on getting our container image built here. There's some ugly stuff that has to go on with dependencies. Because one of the dependencies comes in as a pre-built binary. Okay, so here we go. So now we can see the output from this microservice. It'll just give us a little form email here with the logo. Thank you for your donation. And the receipt as a PDF. So we can see it's got the date, the fund name, the organization, their address, phone, email, the amount donated, and my name. And then a little thank you at the bottom. So basically what happens in here, I'll just go to the shell script. So what happens in here is it's going to build the container image and give it this long-winded name. And yes, that name cannot be made any shorter. We have to use that in order for Amazon to work with it. So then we're going to start the container, and we're going to expose an endpoint on this specific port. And this little ampersand at the end here means we're starting this as a background process, because otherwise the script would block until that container shuts down. So then we're going to have it wait a couple seconds while that initializes, and then we're going to curl this exposed endpoint and pass in the donation ID. And then once that curl finishes, we'll go ahead and shut down the container image that we started back on line 3. So that all works. So then what you'll do, I won't show pushing it to the repo, because when you're done, you'll push it to the cloud storage. You'll just follow these instructions here. I don't want to overwrite the existing one, but I'll show you where it is. You'll go to AWS Services, and where did ECR go? Give me just a moment to find this in the menu. Is it in Compute? let's just use the search bar. If we go to Elastic Container Registry here, and you'll have to make sure that you're set to US East 1 up in the top right there. And then you'll go to the Afford Health / report generator repository, and here you can see our images, the microservice, the monthly batch job, and this was a proof of concept. So what you'll do after you push a new version of the image, it doesn't overwrite the old one. So what you'll have to do, I won't actually do this. You'll select this, click delete. You'll have to type delete in the box and then hit delete. As again, I don't want to do that actually. So then once you have the new version uploaded into AWS, you'll go to Lambda. And this might take a moment to load. And again, you'll want to make sure that you're in US East 1, which is Northern Virginia. And then you'll go onto the second page. You'll find the one that says Report Generator Microservice. And if you want to update the image, you'll go to Image, Deploy New Image, Browse. You'll select the report generator repository from here. Select whichever one in this case, Microservice latest, and then hit Select Image. Again, I don't want to actually overwrite what's there right now. So that should cover most changes you need to make. And then the other part of that microservice is an API gateway endpoint. This just exposes a REST API for the client to invoke that code. So what happens, you'll come in here, API gateway, click on report generator, and it'll be donations, donation ID, post method. So this will take a moment to load. And what you'll do, if you need to update anything in here, you'll just click on which part, and there's very good AWS documentation for this, so I won't go into too much detail. But like if I added another error code, I would go to method response, add response, type in the status code, and then add a description. And then what I would need to do to deploy that, I would need to go to Actions, Deploy API, select a deployment stage. In your case, it'll probably be Dev. Add a short description, and then click Deploy. And I won't actually do that since I don't want to change what's out there. So then what you'll need to do after that, you go to Stages, Dev, and then go to Export, OpenAPI 3 YAML, and you'll download that file. I'm not actually going to download it right now because we don't need to do an update. So you can see the contents of that file in this window. So there are a couple of changes that you'll manually need to make. For whatever reason, API Gateway doesn't export the descriptions. So what you'll have to do is pull up the documentation tab and paste the descriptions there. Oh, and oops, guess I didn't want to navigate away from that quite yet. And then the other thing is the API Gateway doesn't give you an option to manually set the type of a path variable. That's what this little donation ID in brackets means. It's a path variable. So in the exported file, you'll have to change type string here to say type integer. And there's one other place where you'll have to do that. Yeah, right here, you also need to change that to be type integer. So what you'll do, if you want to test that this is working correctly, you can copy that URL and come back here to bash, and you'll do curl with method post. That's what that X post means. And then paste that in, and then do the path to the specific endpoint we want is /donations / whatever donation ID. So again, in our case, that'll be 1. And that's interesting. I wonder if it's because it's not been used in a while. Give me a moment here. Let me do a test of this. I'm guessing it's probably because this hasn't been called in a while. It's just taking a moment to wake up. Yeah, okay, so it's just giving us a timeout, so that's probably just needing to wake up from sleep. Let's just try that again. Yeah, okay, so now that we've gotten it woken up from sleep mode, you can see we just curl that endpoint and we just get the same thing as we got before. So that's the microservice covered. And then the other component of this repo is the monthly batch job. And what that one does, there's some helper functions at the top here. So we connect, basically we go through each organization, we get all of the all of the donations and disbursements for each grant that's owned by that organization, and basically we put together a checkbook register, generate that as a PDF, upload it to S3, and email it out. Pardon me there. And we were just going to email that out to the organization owner and to the organization's email that was on file back in the organization table. Hence why I set all of these to be my address so that when I run this, those emails will come to me. So we're going to change directory in the repo over to the monthly batch folder. And again, there's a shell script, bash build and test locally.sh. And for this one, it'll run, when it's actually in production, this will run entirely automated on a time trigger. So there's no command line arguments that have to be passed to this. And it'll just take a moment to build this. And then we can see some login info here. I should start getting those emails. Yeah, here we go. And we can go ahead and take a look at this. So it'll just have the organization info at the top, a summary. For each fund that's run by the organization, we'll get the total donations for the month, total disbursements for the month, and the ending balance. And then we'll get a detailed view for each fund. So this is the Grace Fund. We can see we've got these donations, and this will all be ordered by date. And you can see here, I set it up so that when there's a donation or disbursement on the same date, the donation will show up first, but that's arbitrary. So if for some reason you need to change that, you shouldn't have much trouble changing that. And then I'll just show you the other one real quick. Same kind of thing. We've got, and here you can see a better example of how this is ordered by date and not necessarily any sort of sorting of donation and disbursements. It just interleaves by date. So again, oh, and the other thing to note is I'll go back to, whoops, I'll go back to the code here. The month automatically, since this runs automated as an automated process, it takes today's date and looks at the previous month to determine which month it needs to pull from the database. So right now I'm recording this in December of 21. So it looks for anything with a donation date of 2021-11 something, and the same with the disbursements. It's looking for 2021-11 something. So when you go to work on this, you'll need to make sure that both of these tables have a decent amount of data for whatever the month before the month that you're working in is, just so that job will actually pull some useful data as opposed to just giving you an empty transaction list. So again, so that's to run everything locally, and then let me go back to that README file. This one also has instructions for pushing it up to the cloud. So again, that's going to be under ECR, report generator, and you can see the monthly batch job container image right there. And again, the commands here are similar to the ones for the microservice. Again, I won't actually run those since I don't want to overwrite what's up there right now. And this one you can just drop the container image there and leave it. You don't have to update a Lambda function or anything like you do with the microservice. So those are the two main components. And then the other thing, I already briefly talked about getting rid of the old copies out of here. To get rid of your old local copies of the container image, because those Docker images are fairly big files, you don't want that taking up any more space on a hard drive than you have to. You'll just run docker image prune, it'll prompt you to make sure, and then docker builder prune to clear out the cache. And that'll take a moment. Yeah, and see, we just reclaimed 466 megabytes, so almost half a gig of data that we didn't need anymore, we were able to get rid of by running those two commands. So that is everything from the Node.js side of things. And then, oh, I almost forgot to mention, with the microservice, after you download that YAML file and make the two changes that I indicated, you'll want to come into docs and then take that file you downloaded and commit that file over this one. You can see this is the same type of thing. So you'll, and you can see here where I've changed those descriptions and the type of the path variable. So you'll just, once you, if you have to update the API gateway configuration, as I said, just export that YAML file, make those changes, and then update this file here in the repo to match what you exported from there with your modifications. So that is the Affordable Report Generator repo in a nutshell. There's also a script here with the database schema. If you need to change the schema, you'll just do a new query over here. So like, I'm not actually going to run this, but let's say I needed to add, let's say I wanted the organization ID in here for some reason, even though I could already get to that. What I would do, I believe, there's reference on here, but I believe the command would be alter table, grant disbursement, add column, org ID, int, and then you would just hit the lightning bolt to run that. And then what you would do to come on, close out of that. Why are you not closing? Oh, don't save that. So what you would do to update that create that database create script is you would go to server data export, check the box to say we want to export that schema, dump structure only, export to self-contained file, include create schema. You would hit start export, and then just take that exported file and overwrite the schema that's in the repo with that exported file. Yeah, so that's the Affordable Report Generator repository in a nutshell.